Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and look guys, there are massive problems happening right now all over the world as far as the economy goes, as far as political upheaval. We've been reporting on it everywhere in the world, and I think it's really important to go into one of the major reasons this is happening, utilizing a country like Argentina. Argentina, of course, has been through what seems like dozens of hyperinflations over the years, simply rebranding their peso as a new peso, Argentinian peso. They just rename a new currency after the old one and think that nothing, and make it look like nothing has changed. Well, the fact of the matter is people on the ground feel the change. People on the ground are feeling the poverty, and it's getting worse and worse all the time. There was a major market crash a short while ago this year after Macri lost the August primary to none other than Alberto Fernandez and his running mate, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, who many of you know as former president. And look, I'm not going to get into the deep political implications in this video because honestly, with this election coming up, first of all, I'm not going to put myself into the political realm of Argentina because I don't live there, but also on the other hand, I have to note that it doesn't matter overall who wins because the people on the ground, the people from Argentina that are watching this right now are going to lose. And this goes for any country in the world that are dealing with the problems of mass central planning and bankers run amok. And of course, there was a major market crash after the August primaries because Macri is more of a right-leaning guy. So a lot of businesses got scared, and for good reason, but it gets a lot deeper than that. And I want to get into a few different articles, and then I'll break it down for you guys. As this BBC article says, Argentina election. Voters go to the polls amid deep economic crisis. And as the article goes into, it says, in front of Congress, a long line of people are queuing up for a portion of mince, beans, potatoes, and cheese. There are perhaps 200 men and women waiting in line, and each week it gets longer and longer. Waiting for her plastic container of food and a cup of water is 27-year-old Antonella. She's come with her young son who has just finished school. This has become routine for the two of them. Their chance to get one decent meal a day. And I quote, before I had a cleaning job, but they let me go, she says. This is my last resort for me and lots of people. Further ahead in the queue is Ariel. He moved from Cordoba to Buenos Aires 5 years ago to find a job as a kitchen hand, but work is hard to come by. He can just about pay for rent, but struggles to find the funds for food. And I quote, what can I say? President Macri has created a country for rich people, he says. I am going to vote for Cristina. At least she changed things a bit. Now, before I get any further into it, see, that is a problem. If first of all, he doesn't seem very enthused by it. He says, oh, well, at least she changed things a bit. At least. I mean, think about that for a second. Think of those words. They're important, and I'll explain it a bit more later on in the video. But that says a lot about the environment, is that, oh, well, one of these puppets, one of these criminals, because government is organized crime at the end of the day, one of these people is going to be not as bad as the other person. Well, that sentiment has been going on since ancient Greece as far as democracy goes, and it hasn't changed at all because it's just constantly governments grow and poverty grows, and the poverty grows because of the vast amount of printing of currency and inflation and central planning. And then they say, well, maybe this president or this prime minister, et cetera, that person will change things. No, they won't. They won't change things because it's not even them as much as it is the central banks that are causing this poverty, but people don't understand money, so therefore they make the same mistake over and over again. Getting back to the article, it says, Argentina's election in short. Incumbent President Mauricio Macri, a right-wing businessman, is facing center-left challenger Alberto Fernandez. Mr. Fernandez's running mate is former populist President Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. To avoid a runoff, the candidate needs to secure 45% of votes, or 40%, and a 10-point lead. So not only is it 51% controlling the 49%, but it's about 40% controlling the 60%. I mean, that says a lot about not just how illogical that system is, but also immoral because it means that you are forcing your neighbor at gunpoint to abide by your beliefs if you disagree, utilizing the crime racket we call government. But again, that's just part of the problem, and we'll get further into it. As it continues, it says, a vote for Cristina. Ariel is referring to Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, who was president of Argentina from 2007 to 2015, who is making a political comeback in these elections. There's one hitch, though. Ariel can't vote for her because she's not a candidate. She's the running mate to Alberto Fernandez. Not that many voters care. Much of Mr. Fernandez's success is down to Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. The populist former president is seen as the driving force in the partnership. She's finally remembered by her supporters as a modern-day Eva Perón, who championed the poor with welfare programs, but she is a divisive figure, also accused of being corrupt and economically irresponsible. Of course, she was charged a few years ago, and that, again, this is politics in a nutshell. But okay, championing the poor with welfare programs, if anyone has ever studied basic economics to even the slightest extent, they know that that obviously isn't the cure for poverty. It's just adding more on top of the already heaping problem that is the creation of currency out of thin air, like the Argentinian Peso, which is seeing vast inflation. In fact, at this moment, the Argentina inflation rate is at 53.5%, as it was last accounted for, and it has been bouncing around for quite some time now. But they've gone through this before, and in recent memory, I don't know why people allow this to keep happening. But when you print currency out of thin air and then charge the interest to the debt onto the populace, and then put in all these social programs and extort people to pay for things that they would support anyway at a lower price if it weren't for the printing and if it weren't for the social programs, kicking small businesses out, basically propping up major monopolies under the guise of doing the exact opposite, maybe this wouldn't be a problem. Maybe this wouldn't repeat over and over again for Argentinians that have seen this economic crisis happen over and over again over the last few generations. It's absolutely astonishing. And at the same time as all of this, we have to remember that the unemployment rate is absolutely chaotic right now at 10.6%. And that's just what's accounted for. If you actually account for the labor force participation rates in these countries and how much of the employment is actually government versus private sector, that accounts for a huge chunk that's missing from that number. So you could expect the number to be much higher than that. And of course, people say, well, they want higher wages. Well, wait a second. Those wages are going to be equivalent to what they're worth now. You can add a zero to the end of a number, but that doesn't mean that that number isn't going to be worth the same amount as it previously was with one less zero when inflation is rising at such a rapid rate, and when you're just centrally planning an economy and decorating it to look nice when in reality it's absolutely chaotic and terrible. And again, this is not going to be solved by a different party, especially the same party who was also involved in politics in Argentina when this was just getting started. And I want to get back into the article here. It says, but with Ms. Fernandez de Kirchner on the ticket, Mr. Fernandez is looking the most likely winner on Sunday. And I quote, if this Sunday the Fernandez win the election, which Fernandez will be in power, asks economist Fernando Marengo, reflecting a wider concern that Mr. Fernandez will be a mere puppet in power. Argentina's elections are all about the economy. With nearly 1 in 3 people now living in poverty, here Argentines are backing the candidate they think is best placed to lead the country out of the crisis. President Macri was a business-friendly face who promised yet failed to solve Argentina's economic problems. Those problems many blame on Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner and her populist policies of social spending. Little is known of Alberto Fernandez's policies, but he says he will play safe with finances. If he wins the elections, he will start having to negotiate with its creditors, including the IMF, but not everyone believes he will call the shots if populist Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner is the second in line. And that, says experts, could spell disaster. And again, they're looking for a politician to save the economy. Well, at the most, what they could do is put off the collapse further, which means that the collapse will happen much more dramatically. It'll come down even harder. And remember, this is a worldwide problem. It's not just Argentina. And we're seeing chaos in all these countries around the world, including Ecuador and Chile. We're seeing it all over the world, including Venezuela, and from Barcelona, Spain, to Paris to Hong Kong. Everywhere you look, there's these problems, and the reasoning behind that being that there's huge economic woes that are affecting people on the ground, and people get restless after a while, and they look for ways to blame it on different things to benefit their viewpoint instead of looking for the real solution to the problem, which isn't government, which isn't a different currency with the same name that's continuously printed out of thin air. And as banks just print vast amount of currency out of thin air and charge it onto the populace under social contract usury laws, and it's just so wrong on so many levels. The legal tender laws, and this is why so many people are flooding to things like cryptocurrency and blockchain alternatives in a lot of these countries, including Argentina. It's helped a lot of people out. I also want to mention that the government debt to GDP in Argentina is currently sitting at 86.2% as of 2018. The 2019 numbers haven't come out yet, so one can only imagine where it's gone from there, because 86.2 rose from 56.6 the year previous. So obviously, and this has been climbing steadily since about 2011, and it only went down leading into 2011 following vast central planning that tried to prop down the debt. But it only led to what we're seeing today. It's all like a problem, reaction, solution, repeat, the Hegelian dialectic over and over again, trying to fix a problem with the same thing that caused the problem in the first place. As this Al Jazeera article says, the economy looms large as Argentines head to the polls Sunday. And as it says, the candy factory producing the brightly colored honey-like confection Milcitas had weathered several economic crises in its 40-year history, but the current one ravaging Argentina proved to be its undoing. On July 11th, the maker of Milcitas shut its doors, leaving nearly 100 workers suddenly jobless in La Matanza, one of the counties that make up the economically ravaged Conurbano region around Buenos Aires. Most of the men and women thrown out of work were the sole breadwinners of their households. Many had spent around half their lives on the factory floor, but not all of them are ready to give up on Milcitas. Group of former workers has occupied the shuttered factory in the hope of turning it into a cooperative. A changing of the guard they believe is entirely possible should the center-left Peronist ticket of Alberto Fernandez and former President Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner capture the Argentine presidency when voters go to the polls this Sunday. Silvia Ayala, who represents the workers, blames incumbent pro-market President Mauricio Macri for the current economic crisis. And I quote, "We're the ones who are here trying to move forward, pouring our own sweat into it," Ayala told Al Jazeera. "We keep coming up against obstacles to form a cooperative because it's not convenient for the government to have a cooperative or a factory that has been taken over and run by workers." Ayala, who supports Fernandez's candidacy, said she is hoping a left-leaning administration will be able to kickstart the economy and with it the factory's fortunes. And I quote, "People don't have money to buy bread. You can imagine they're not going to spend it on candies," she said. So again, this is another symptom of the same problem. These people think that, oh, well, maybe we'll just try the thing that we tried a few years ago over again and see if that works, or maybe this different flavor of collectivism, maybe that'll work. And again, we just continuously see the same problems pop up. Government isn't going to solve the problems of government. Central banks aren't going to solve the problems of central banks, but most people don't even have focus on the central bank because they're focused on the government, not realizing that regardless of the policies that they push forward, when you print fast currency out of thin air at the central bank, then you're going to continuously have the same problem over and over and over again. And it's really frustrating to watch because I just see these people get impoverished all over the world, using the same method of trying to change things over and over again by not focusing on the real problem, not trying to understand money, and instead looking for some person who says that they know how to lead everyone best and, rule over everyone best, as if they're the solution. They're not the solution, and they're not going to change the fact that you're printing vast currency out of thin air. How many times does Argentina have to go through this before people recognize this. How many times do you have to watch countless people become impoverished, countless people starve, and then people come out and say, well, maybe the government can fix this. And then it gets, put off for a few more years. And then, in comes inflation again. I mean, let's not forget that the all-time high, according to the stats for inflation in Argentina, was in the year 1990, in March of 1990, at 20,262% inflation. That is so absurdly ridiculous, and you'd think people would learn from that and educate themselves about money because of obviously how much that victimized them. But this happens anywhere you go in the world. Everywhere you go in the world, people do not actually study money. They repeat the same Keynesian tactics over and over again. Every country in the world does it, and it's sickening. And we're entering into a massive global crisis that's been pushed off for so long. There's a multi-quadrillion-dollar derivatives bubble worldwide. There is the problem of vast amounts of debt, private debt, public debt. Either way, the public debt is extorted from the private individuals. You have the housing bubbles worldwide. You have the currency bubbles worldwide that play into the rest of the bubbles. You have pension bubbles. The shortfall worldwide is set to hit $400 trillion by the year 2050, if it actually makes it that long, which I don't think it will. Even the top economists are starting to say, hey, we're heading into a recession. And then what do people do? They look for the same thing that caused the problem in the first place to come in and solve the problem. It's just a perpetual circle. Create problem, come in as a solution, using the same thing that created the problem in the first place. Central planning, propping up the economy, and it's all garbage, folks. It's all garbage, and it's going to repeat the same problems for eternity. If people don't start looking into what is causing it in the first place, it's extraordinarily frustrating to watch. And Argentina currently has the 5th largest inflation rate in the world, and as this Yahoo Finance article says, even though inflation rates in Argentina are slowly going down, this year was devastating for the country's economy with the highest peak of 57.3% in May this year. The inflation rates have doubled compared to last year's rates. A lot of companies shutting their doors, and we're going to see unrest in the streets of Buenos Aires and other places throughout Argentina, like we're seeing in places like Chile, if this continues any longer. And it looks like it will, because people, instead of looking for the real problems, are going, well, maybe this former president can be president again and change things, even though she didn't change anything when she was in, other than short-term little maneuvers that actually impoverish people worse. And they're like, oh, well, this pro-market president, he's doing so terrible. Yeah, he probably is. Well, but your problem is unemployment, and your problem is that businesses are shutting, and he's pro-business, and you think that getting him out of power and changing it up is going to make things better? Well, wait a second. How exactly does that work? Well, it certainly isn't economically feasible, but also it doesn't matter, because even if you did re-elect him, it's going to change nothing, because you're going to continuously have inflation going up as, the central banks print a bunch of currency. And of course, at this moment, you can look at the interest rates in Argentina that are bouncing up and down. And what we see on this chart here, the Argentina 7-day LELIQ rate, the interest rate is set at currently around 68%. And that is vast manipulation. People look at these lines and go, those are just squiggly lines. That is them manipulating the economy into prosperity, short-term and long-term absolute oblivion. All fiat currencies throughout history revert to zero, and you'd think that people in Argentina would recognize that a bit better. I'm not criticizing Argentinians as a whole. I'm criticizing this constant lack of self-care, of learning from history that happens in every country in the world. You enter into a crisis and people say, well, what president or prime minister can we elect to change that? People have no ability, seemingly generally worldwide, to be independent, to not follow the same old tricks over and over again that have gone on for thousands of years. People seem unwilling to, understand how truly important they as individuals are as sustainable human beings, as free human beings. Freedom is simply just individual responsibility. That's it in its most simplistic form. And it comes down to you as individuals breaking free from the chains that so many unfortunately revere in order to truly apply the right solutions in your own life. And that's how things change, and create alternatives and look at alternatives outside the financial system and break free from that financial system, which depends on the dependence of the masses. They depend on the stupidity of the masses. They depend on people not, catching on after thousands of years that they're being used as pawns to sacrifice for the king and the queen. So regardless of who wins here, the people of Argentina are not going to win. And I feel sick about it because I know a lot of people in Argentina. I talk with a lot of people in Argentina, and they're feeling the burden. And I hope that people catch on soon enough and learn from the mistakes that are repeated far too often. That currency you see behind me here, these Argentinian pesos, they could be printed and printed and printed. That 100 note there will soon be worth the 10. That's the reality. The price of bread isn't going up. The value of your currency is going down. And you have to understand, well, as much as welfare seems like it's going to help you, stealing from richer people that employ people and putting them out of business to a certain extent over time, while propping up major corporations that can afford to, be extorted that much, what that's going to do is, well, those poor people that get that currency, they get this currency here in their hands. And over time, it doesn't change the fact that it's going to be worth less and less, and they'll need more and more, and then it'll be worth less and less, and they'll need more and more, and eventually you're just going to be paying all your money to taxes, working most of the year, working your butt off in order to give the state money to splurge on bureaucracy and nonsense, paying off the interest on the debt, and that small chunk that goes to people who have been impoverished by that very system in the first place, thus creating a perpetual circle for eternity. And again, bet 20... you can add zeros to it. Just keep adding zeros to it. Keep adding zeros to it. Eventually, you'll end up like Zimbabwe or Venezuela or any of these other countries. People could say all they want. The sanctions on Venezuela caused Venezuela to go down. It certainly helped. It certainly contributed to it. But eventually it was going to crash anyway because they printed vast amounts of currency. And by the way, IMF loans are not going to help. What the IMF does is the same thing as what China does. It loans money to countries that they know those countries cannot pay back, and the citizens cannot pay back no matter how much they're extorted. So then they come in and try and buy up the country, essentially. They've done that in Africa with China. IMF has done that to so many countless countries, impoverishing them in debt, and then coming in and saying, well, you owe us all this debt, so now we're going to essentially own you as a global governance system. And it's all part of the plan. It's all part of the trick. And the intentions of the massive elite entities that do this are not to make people's lives better. It's the more impoverished and the more indebted, the better it is. If you shove someone down a bottomless pit of debt, you're forced to ask for a ladder up from the government and the banking system, pushing you into perfect servitude to them, right where they want you. So what can we learn from this, folks? It comes down to you. There's more solutions than there are problems in this world. You have to look towards food, water, shelter, self-defense. You're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block, of course. Gold and silver, in my opinion, as wealth insurance. This has nothing to do with investments. It's just historical wealth insurance, in my opinion. And I think that people should look into that, do their own due diligence, of course. But, look at history and how that's paid off, as well as, decentralized, properly, fundamentally useful cryptocurrencies and blockchain infrastructure technology to replace the old guard. Of course, you see governments are afraid of it, and now they're trying to get in on it to try and take advantage of this system as the global monetary system collapses at their feet. They'd be stupid not to, but they're fighting a losing battle. People are fighting a winning battle as far as cryptocurrencies go when it comes to adapting to crazy laws and restrictions and taxes and vast central planning by different governments and banks around the world. It's endless, and it will all come down eventually. Inevitably, it has to. But all the while the banks are bankrupt and all these entities are scrambling to catch up, a lot of people are looking at cryptocurrencies because they can be properly useful as a tool against these massive crises, as we see in so many countries around the world, including Venezuela, which most people in Argentina surely are very aware of. And I mean, we've never seen this before in history, people being able to utilize this. I'm wearing a Dash shirt right now. And the reason I'm wearing it for this article or for this video is for the purpose of noting what people in Venezuela have been doing with things like Dash in order to survive this crisis. And I believe that it's more likely that people are going to be spending cryptocurrencies in international transactions at the snap of a finger without any governing body telling them they can or cannot. It's inefficient. The government cannot restrict it. And it's such a massive thing that you could send millions of dollars with a fee of at the most a few dollars, at the least almost nothing. And it's amazingly efficient in being able to move money from one place to another. It's not going to be as easy to send gold from one place or another, though there are interesting ideas surrounding blockchain infrastructure technology with gold. So there's that as well. And silver, like Lode, AGX, Anthem Gold, things like that. So anyway, we'll continue to go into this. These are all ideas, but I think the number one solution is responsibility. Just being a responsible individual and not being a dependent slave, because, people have to stop acting like cattle on a farm. They say, well, the grass is good. We got freedom because we have grass. We can eat the grass on the ground and it's nice and green and everything, not looking at the fences surrounding them and knowing that they're about to be led off to the slaughter with a smile on their face while they vote for the best person to rule over the masses and extort people to death, because the government also, like the central banks and banks, depend on the dependence of the masses. They don't benefit from you guys being more free. They can dangle what looks like freedom in front of your face every now and then in every election cycle and get people to go along with it. The lesser of the evils. Well, how does that work? Well, I would prefer, they say getting whipped twice a day isn't as bad as getting whipped 3 times a day. I prefer not getting whipped at all, guys, and, ruling myself and not being extorted. And I also don't think it's moral to force my neighbor to be extorted at the rate that I wish for the things that I want to have for free, quote unquote, while it creates more monopolies and brings down the economy, and the recession that's papered over for all these years continues to perpetuate. Companies are going bankrupt. People are becoming more and more impoverished, unemployed. And the best of society is not at the forefront of people's priorities, of the people being able to utilize their talents and their ideas to strive for the best and create the best things and for the best price and compete on the market. You don't see that. You just see government and central banks enslaving the masses. Time to wake up and learn from past mistakes. Anyway, I appreciate everyone joining us today, and until next time, we'll continue to cover this story. Stay tuned, make sure to subscribe, press like, and all that kind of stuff. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, Wham! Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We cannot do it without you guys. Every donation is extremely, extremely appreciated, as we're getting incredibly shadow banned. We've lost 80% of our audience since January of 2019 and counting. They are ripping us apart here on YouTube, and the only thing we could do in the meantime as we prepare for the next big step is to ask for help from the viewers that support our free information that we try to post on a daily basis. You can also find us on Subscribestar, where just $1 a month, that's all it takes, $1 a month is all it takes to truly make a huge difference. If everyone gave $1 a month, it would change everything for independent media, and we could win this information war, and we could defeat the mainstream medias eventually. And of course, on Subscribestar, we post subscriber-only content that you'll only see on Subscribestar. So make sure to pledge there, become a patron. That makes a huge difference, guys. And also, don't forget to check out our Bitcoin address below in the comments and description, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on the alternatives. We will likely be deleted by YouTube in the next 2 years. It's already happening on a vast scale, so make sure to find us on float.app, that's flote.app, at Josh Sigurdson, as well as at WAM, W-A-M. Float.app is replacing every social media, and I mean, it's just incredible the opportunities it provides for not just creators, but for the average person who wants to get away from these nannies telling them what they can or cannot see. They plan to replace Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, Tumblr, Reddit, and Patreon. You could subscribe to us on Float and pledge with cryptocurrency. It's really innovative. We are also on BitChute at World Alternative Media, as well as so many others, Minds, PocketNet. You can find us at World Alternative Media on Instagram. There's many options. And finally, don't forget to join us at Anarchapulco 2020, the famous event, the best liberty event known to mankind, other than perhaps Anarcho Vegas 2020. There are 2 major events coming up that we are extremely excited about, and you can use promo code WAM, that's W-A-M, and save 10% on your tickets to these legendary conferences. There's so many amazing people speaking there. You won't want to miss it. So make sure to support in any way you can, even if it's just sharing our videos, pressing like, pressing to be notified. Anything helps, folks. You are the change you wish to see. Thanks for watching, everyone. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.